Admiral HFY stood before the massive display screen in the command center of the Altarian Defense Station. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease, pulling up data streams from the outer sensor networks. The coffee-colored liquid in his breathing apparatus bubbled gently as he processed the information flowing across his multiple eyes. "Sir, we have confirmation on the unknown contact," reported Lieutenant Velna from her station. Her voice carried the typical calm efficiency of the Altarian military. "Object is maintaining steady course toward the inner systems. Speed is consistent with early fusion drive technology." HFY's main eyes focused on the sensor readings while his secondary eyes continued monitoring other displays. The object was large, roughly 800 meters in length, but its energy signature was puzzling. The design seemed crude, almost primitive. Thick metal plating covered most of the hull, and the propulsion system appeared to be some form of basic fusion rocket. "Analysis confirms it's artificial, sir," Velna continued, "but the construction methods are unusual. Heavy use of refined metals rather than synthetic composites. Energy efficiency is poor compared to standard galactic designs." The Admiral's breathing apparatus made a soft humming sound as he considered this information. In his 3 centuries of service, he had overseen first contact with 17 different species. Most followed predictable patterns. They would approach the galaxy's edge, their ships barely capable of interstellar travel, hoping to join the great community of worlds that made up the Galactic Council. "Has it responded to our standard greeting protocols?" HFY asked. "Yes, sir. They've identified their vessel as the UNS Indomitable. They request safe passage to the nearest inhabited system for what they call diplomatic contact. The language they're using appears to be translated through some form of basic computer system." HFY nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what he expected. Another young species, probably only a few decades into space travel, seeking guidance from their more advanced neighbors. The Galactic Council had established clear procedures for exactly this situation. "Send them navigation data to Nexus Station," he ordered. "Inform Council Command that we have another first contact situation. Standard protocols should apply." As Velna began transmitting the information, HFY turned his attention to the detailed scans of the approaching ship. Something about its design bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. The hull was covered in what appeared to be armor plating, far thicker than necessary for a peaceful exploration vessel. The energy readings suggested multiple reactor cores, which seemed excessive for a ship of this size. "Sir," another officer called from the scanning station, "I'm detecting some unusual readings from their vessel. Multiple high-energy sources throughout the ship. The distribution pattern doesn't match typical civilian or even early military designs." HFY moved to examine the scans more closely. His species had evolved excellent pattern recognition abilities, useful both in their oceanic homeworld and in military analysis. The energy patterns were indeed strange. Most ships, especially those from newly spacefaring species, had centralized power systems. This vessel showed dozens of separate high-energy sources distributed throughout its structure. "Could be backup systems," he mused aloud. "Some species are more cautious about redundancy than others. Send a deeper analysis request to the Council's Xenotechnology Department. They'll want to study this before the formal contact begins." The hours passed quietly as the unknown ship continued its approach. Reports flowed in from various departments. The linguistics team confirmed that the aliens were using a translation system, though it appeared more sophisticated than typical for a primitive species. The xenobiology department expressed excitement about studying a new form of life. The MAO, cultural analysis team, requested all available data about the ship's design and any cultural artifacts they might be transmitting. HFY found himself reviewing the sensor data repeatedly. Each time, the same details caught his attention. The ship's construction was robust, almost absurdly so. The metal plating was not just armor, it was layered, with multiple different materials in a complex arrangement that suggested advanced metallurgy. The fusion drives, while appearing primitive, showed burn patterns indicating extremely high efficiency when examined closely. "Lieutenant Velna," he called. Send a priority message to Council Command. Request that they assign their best first contact team to this situation. Sir, is there a problem? Zexai stared at the display showing the approaching vessel. I'm not sure, but something about this doesn't feel like a typical first contact. Their ship design suggests they've put considerable thought into defensive capabilities. Sir, that's not unusual. Most species develop some military capabilities before achieving interstellar travel. The galaxy can seem threatening to newcomers. The Admiral nodded, but his unease remained. In his experience, truly primitive species built their first interstellar vessels focused on exploration, trade, or colonization. This ship looked like it had been designed to survive in hostile space. Not just survive, but fight. Over the next day, more information trickled in. The aliens, who called themselves humans, had responded to all diplomatic queries with perfect courtesy. They provided basic information about their species and their homeworld called Earth. They expressed interest in learning about galactic civilization and hoped to establish peaceful relations. Yet something in their responses suggested they already knew more about the galaxy than they were admitting. Their questions were too specific, too focused on military capabilities and defensive technologies. They asked about the size of the Council fleet, the types of weapons typically used in galactic conflicts, and the procedures for territorial disputes between species. Sir, Velna reported, the humans have transmitted additional data about their vessel. They classify it as a diplomatic escort and mention that it carries standard defensive armaments for protection during long-range missions. Zexai reviewed the new data. Standard defensive armaments. The energy signatures he was seeing would require weapon systems that could power small cities. Either the humans had a very different definition of standard, or they were not being entirely honest about their capabilities. Send another priority message to Council Command, he ordered. Recommend that they prepare a full military honor guard for the welcome ceremony, not as a threat, but as a show of respect for what appears to be a more advanced species than initially assessed. As the UNS Indomitable continued its steady approach toward Nexus Station, Admiral Zexai couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to discover something unexpected about their new neighbors. The humans were polite, courteous, and seemingly peaceful, but their ship told a different story, one of a species that had learned to prepare for trouble long before seeking out new friends among the stars. The quiet sector would not remain quiet much longer. Nexus Station orbited the bright star Altair Prime like a massive metal flower, its 12 docking arms extending outward to accommodate ships from hundreds of different species. Ambassador Krelthak adjusted his ceremonial robes as he walked through the main diplomatic hall, his hooves clicking against the polished floor. Today would mark another routine first contact, the 847th in his distinguished career. The primitive vessel has docked at Arm 7, his aide informed him. Initial scans confirm a crew of approximately 50 individuals. They appear to be carbon-based, bipedal, and within normal parameters for Class M species. Krelthak nodded, his antlered head bobbing with satisfaction. Excellent. Have the standard welcome materials been prepared? Cultural integration guides, trade regulations, territorial assignment protocols? Yes, Ambassador. The full newcomer package has been translated into their language. The xenobiology team is particularly excited. Apparently their species shows some interesting genetic variations. The ambassador entered the grand reception hall, where representatives from dozens of council species had gathered. This was always an exciting moment for the scientific community. New species brought fresh perspectives, unique technologies, and often amusing stories about their primitive attempts to understand the universe. Dr. Yilandra, the chief xenobiologist, approached with her usual enthusiasm. Her crystalline body structure caught the light as she moved. Ambassador, I've reviewed the preliminary scans of their vessel. These humans appear to have developed space travel quite recently, but their ship construction suggests they're remarkably practical engineers. How so, Doctor? Well, most new species focus on elegance or efficiency in their first interstellar vessels. These humans seem to have prioritized durability and redundancy Lots of backup systems, multiple power sources, very robust construction. It's almost as if they expected their ship to be damaged during the journey. Krelthak found this mildly interesting but not unusual. Some species develop in more dangerous stellar neighborhoods, Doctor. Perhaps they encountered asteroids or radiation that required additional protection. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the human delegation. The airlocks opened with a soft hiss and 6 figures in dark blue uniforms entered the hall. They moved with a coordinated precision that immediately caught the attention of several military observers present. The leader was a female of medium height with short dark hair and calm, intelligent eyes. She wore simple insignia that marked her as a captain, though her bearing suggested someone accustomed to command. The other 5 humans arranged themselves in a loose formation that provided clear sight lines to all exits while appearing completely casual. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, the human leader said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations ship Indomitable. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for this welcome. Ambassador Krelthak stepped forward with practiced diplomacy. Captain Chen, welcome to Nexus Station. I am Ambassador Krelthak, Senior Diplomatic Representative of the Galactic Council. We are pleased to meet another intelligent species seeking to join our community of worlds. Captain Chen smiled politely. We appreciate your hospitality, Ambassador. We're eager to learn about galactic civilization and explore possibilities for peaceful cooperation. The formal presentations began. Representatives from major council species introduced themselves and their worlds. Each offered the standard welcomes, trade opportunities, and cultural exchange programs. Captain Chen listened attentively, asking occasional questions that showed she understood the complex political structure being described. But her questions were oddly specific. She asked about defense treaties between species, the size and capabilities of the Council fleet, and the procedures for resolving territorial disputes. When Dr. Yelandra enthusiastically described the peaceful nature of galactic civilization, Chen asked about the last major conflict and how it had been resolved. Oh, we haven't had a significant military conflict in over 3,000 years. Dr. Yelandra replied proudly. The Council's combined fleet serves mainly as a deterrent and for disaster relief operations. Impressive, Chen said. What would you estimate is the total military strength of the Council? Ships, personnel, that sort of thing? Ambassador Indy, Krelthak found the question a bit unusual but not concerning. Captain, such specific information is typically shared during the full membership process. Today is simply an introduction to help your species understand what joining our community would mean. Of course, Ambassador. I apologize if my questions seem forward. My government wants to ensure we understand our potential neighbors thoroughly. The reception continued with the standard presentations. Council representatives explained the benefits of membership, access to advanced technologies, protection under galactic law, trade opportunities across thousands of worlds, and cultural exchange programs. They outlined the simple requirements: peaceful intentions, basic space travel capability, and willingness to abide by Council regulations. Throughout the presentations, Captain Chen's 5 companions remained silent but alert. They were clearly military personnel, though they showed no weapons or threatening behavior. One appeared to be taking detailed notes on everything being said. Another seemed to be studying the station's architecture and security arrangements. Captain, Ambassador Krelthak said during a pause in the presentations, your companions seem very observant. Are they scientists studying our technology? In a way, Ambassador. They're members of our diplomatic security team. It's standard procedure for us to maintain detailed records of all first contact situations. Security team, Captain, I assure you there's no danger here. Nexus Station has sophisticated defensive systems, and the Council maintains perfect order. Chen's smile remained pleasant. I'm sure you do, Ambassador. But humans have learned it's wise to be prepared for unexpected situations. We prefer to hope for the best while planning for other possibilities. The phrasing struck several listeners as unusual. Most new species expressed wonder at the peaceful nature of galactic civilization, The humans seemed to be treating it as a pleasant surprise rather than an expected reality. As the formal presentations concluded, Council representatives began offering the standard guidance for primitive species. They explained how humanity would need to gradually adapt to galactic standards, how their technology would need upgrading to meet basic safety requirements, and how their government would need restructuring to participate in Council democracy. Captain Chen listened to these condescending explanations with apparent patience, but several observers noticed that her calm demeanor never wavered, even when being told that her species would need centuries of guidance before being trusted with important responsibilities. "One final question, if I may," Chen said as the session neared its end. "I understand the Council maintains this peace through strength and diplomacy. Would it be possible to observe some of your military capabilities? My government would be very interested in understanding how such an effective peace is maintained." Ambassador Krelthak exchanged glances with the military representatives present. It was an unusual request, but not unreasonable. Demonstrations of Council strength often helped new species understand the futility of aggressive behavior. "That can certainly be arranged, Captain," he replied. "In fact, the Defense Force is conducting routine exercises in the nearby asteroid field tomorrow. You're welcome to observe from a safe distance." "That's very generous, Ambassador. In return, perhaps we could demonstrate some of our own defensive capabilities. It might help you understand human engineering approaches." The Council representative smiled indulgently. A demonstration by a primitive species might be educational, if only to show how far they had yet to advance. "Of course, Captain," Krelthak agreed. "I'm sure our military experts would find it quite instructive." As the human delegation was escorted to their quarters, Captain Chen's parting words lingered in the minds of several observers. "Thank you for your hospitality. Tomorrow should be very enlightening for everyone involved." The observation deck of Nexus Station offered a spectacular view of the asteroid field that stretched across 3 million kilometers of space. Massive rocks tumbled slowly through the void, some as large as cities, others no bigger than houses. It was here that the Galactic Council conducted its military exercises, far enough from inhabited worlds to avoid accidents, but close enough for easy observation. Captain Chen stood at the main viewing window, her hands clasped behind her back, as she watched Council ships take their positions. Beside her, Ambassador Krelthak gestured proudly at the formation of vessels moving into the exercise area. "Captain, what you're about to witness represents 3 millennia of military development," he announced. "The Council fleet combines the best technologies from hundreds of species, refined through centuries of cooperation and advancement." Chen nodded politely. "I'm looking forward to seeing what galactic civilization has achieved, Ambassador." The observation deck filled with dignitaries, scientists, and military officers from across the Council species. Admiral Zexhai had arrived, from his border station specifically for this demonstration. Dr. Yelandra floated nearby, her crystalline body shimmering with excitement. Even the normally reserved Therulian trade representatives had come to witness the display. "The exercise will be conducted by the Pride of Altair," Admiral Zexhai explained, his forearms gesturing toward the massive ship taking position near the asteroid field. "She's one of our newest Dreadnought-class vessels. Length, 600 meters. Crew, 800. Armed with the most advanced plasma projection systems in the galaxy." Captain Chen studied the warship through the observation window. It was sleek and elegant, its hull covered in the smooth composite materials favored by advanced galactic civilizations. Energy readings showed sophisticated shielding systems and what appeared to be highly efficient fusion reactors. "Very impressive," she said. "How does it compare to your older vessels?" "The Pride of Altair is approximately 50 times more powerful than our ships from just 5 centuries ago," Admiral Zexhai replied with obvious pride. "Council military technology advances rapidly when hundreds of species contribute their knowledge." The demonstration began with a display of precision maneuvering. The Pride of Altair moved through the asteroid field with graceful efficiency, its computer systems calculating perfect trajectories around the massive rocks. The ships, Shields flickered briefly as small debris bounced harmlessly off the energy barriers. "Now observe our targeting systems," Ambassador Krelthak announced. The dreadnought selected a large asteroid approximately 2 kilometers in diameter. Brilliant blue-white beams lanced out from the ship's weapon ports, striking the rocky surface with surgical precision. The plasma bombardment carved deep channels into the asteroid, superheating rock until it glowed like molten metal. Within minutes, the massive rock had been reduced to fragments, then to dust, then to constituent atoms scattered in the solar wind. The assembled council representatives applauded politely. This was exactly the level of performance they expected from their finest military assets. "Remarkable precision," Captain Chen commented. "How long did it take to develop weapons of that capability?" "The current generation plasma systems represent about 800 years of continuous refinement," Dr. Ylandra replied, "each generation more efficient and precise than the last." Admiral Zexhai gestured toward several smaller council vessels that were now demonstrating coordinated attack patterns. "What you see here, Captain, is the result of galactic cooperation. No single species could have developed this level of technology alone. It requires the combined knowledge of hundreds of worlds working in harmony." Chen watched as the smaller ships executed flawless battle formations, their movements synchronized with computer-assisted precision. Energy weapons created brilliant light shows as they systematically destroyed selected asteroids. The display was designed to be both impressive and somewhat intimidating, a gentle reminder to new species about the futility of aggressive behavior. "Captain Chen," Ambassador Krelthak said as the demonstration concluded, "I hope this gives you some sense of the security that Council membership provides. No single species need fear attack or aggression when protected by such capabilities." "It certainly does, Ambassador," Chen replied. "Your technology is quite advanced compared to most of what we've seen during our journey here." The phrase caught several listeners by surprise. Most of what they'd seen. The implication was that humanity had encountered other civilizations during their travels, which seemed unlikely for such a primitive species. "Captain?" Admiral Zexhai asked, "Have your people had contact with other spacefaring species before reaching Council space?" Chen's expression remained perfectly neutral. "We've observed various civilizations from a distance during our exploration of this region. Most seemed less advanced than what you've shown us here." Ambassador Krelthak smiled indulgently. "Captain, with respect, I think you may be overestimating the primitive cultures you encountered. The Council represents the pinnacle of galactic civilization. We've been refining our technologies for thousands of years." "I'm sure you have, Ambassador." Chen turned from the observation window and faced the assembled council representatives. "In the spirit of mutual understanding, perhaps we could demonstrate some of our own defensive capabilities. It might help you better assess how humanity might contribute to galactic security." The suggestion drew amused glances among the council members. A demonstration by humans would indeed be educational, though probably not in the way Captain Chen intended. "Of course, Captain," Admiral Zexhai replied graciously. "We would be honored to observe human military technology, though I should mention that our sensors are quite sophisticated. We'll be able to analyze your weapon systems in considerable detail." "That's perfectly acceptable, Admiral. We believe in transparency with potential allies." Captain Chen activated a small communication device and spoke briefly in her own language. The translation systems picked up only fragments, references to minimum yield, standard defensive demonstration, and maintain safe distance. Ambassador Krelthak noticed Admiral Zexhai's expression growing thoughtful as he monitored the communications. The old military commander seemed to be reconsidering something about the human ship they'd observed earlier. "Captain," the Admiral asked carefully, "when you refer to minimum yield, what exactly are you planning to demonstrate?" Chen turned back to face the assembled representatives, her expression still pleasantly neutral. "Just our standard defensive systems, Admiral. Nothing that would damage station operations or endanger anyone here." Dr. Ylandra moved closer to the observation window, her excitement visible in the rapid shifting of colors through her crystalline structure. "This is fascinating. We'll finally get to see how a recently spacefaring species approaches military technology." The developmental differences should be quite instructive. Outside the observation window, the UNS Indomitable began moving toward the asteroid field. At this distance, it looked smaller and more primitive than the graceful Council vessels. Its hull showed the rough, practical construction that marked early space technology. But as Captain Chen watched her ship maneuver into position, several Council observers began noticing details they had missed before. The Indomitable's movement patterns were not random or inefficient. The ship handled like a vessel designed for combat, responding to pilot commands with precision that suggested extensive training and practice. "Captain," Ambassador Kreltak said, suddenly feeling less certain about the entertainment value of this demonstration, "perhaps you could give us some idea of what we're about to observe. Our safety protocols require advance notice of any weapons testing." Captain Chen smiled, and for the first time, her expression carried something that might have been anticipation. "Don't worry, Ambassador. You're about to see exactly what humanity considers minimum yield for defensive operations." The UNS Indomitable came to a stop approximately 50 kilometers from the largest remaining asteroid in the field. Sensor readings began showing activity throughout the human ship as various systems came online. Admiral Zexhai stared at his tactical displays, his four eyes widening as he processed what he was seeing. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "I think we may have underestimated our new neighbors." The observation deck fell silent as energy readings from the UNS Indomitable began climbing beyond anything the Council sensors had ever recorded. Admiral Zexhai stared at his displays in growing disbelief, his forearms moving frantically across the control panels as he tried to confirm what he was seeing. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice tight with concern, "our sensors are showing power levels that exceed our safety parameters. Perhaps you should reduce your demonstration to avoid equipment damage." Captain Chen turned from the viewing window, her expression still calm but now carrying a hint of something that made several observers step back involuntarily. "Admiral, this is minimum yield for our defensive systems. We've already reduced power output to the lowest setting that will provide a meaningful demonstration." Ambassador Kreltak looked between his military advisor and the human captain, suddenly feeling that events were moving beyond his control. "Captain, what exactly are you planning to demonstrate?" "Our standard approach to removing obstacles during defensive operations, Ambassador." Outside, the UNS Indomitable was transforming. What had appeared to be crude metal plating was sliding, a way to reveal weapon ports along the ship's hull. But these weren't the elegant energy projectors that marked advanced Council technology. These were massive, brutally practical installations that looked like they could punch holes through planets. Dr. Yolandra pressed against the observation window, her crystalline body flickering with patterns that indicated extreme excitement, mixed with growing concern. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. What type of weapons are those?" "Quantum torpedo systems, primarily," Captain Chen replied casually, "with some antimatter-enhanced kinetic penetrators for hardened targets, standard equipment for long-range exploration vessels." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Antimatter weapons were theoretical concepts in most Council civilizations, requiring technology that was barely within the reach of their most advanced species. The humans were discussing them as standard equipment. Admiral Zexhai's tactical displays showed the UNS Indomitable selecting a target, an asteroid roughly 5 kilometers in diameter, composed primarily of iron and nickel. It was one of the larger rocks in the field, chosen because its composition would provide clear sensor readings of whatever weapons the humans employed. "Beginning demonstration," Captain Chen announced. The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came not from the weapons themselves, but from the way space around the Indomitable began to distort. The ship's hull, which had appeared rough and primitive, was now revealed as layered armor plating designed to contain and channel enormous energies. Heat sinks extended from the vessel's sides, glowing red-hot as they prepared to dissipate waste energy from weapon systems that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. "My God," whispered the Therullian trade representative, using a human expression he'd learned from the translation systems. "What kind of civilization builds ships like this?" The quantum torpedoes launched in complete silence, appearing on sensors as impossibly dense packets of energy, that bent space around them as they traveled. They covered the distance to the target asteroid in seconds, striking with precision that made the Council's plasma bombardment look crude by comparison. The asteroid didn't simply explode or vaporize. It ceased to exist. Where 5 kilometers of solid rock and metal had tumbled through space moments before, there was now a perfectly spherical void. The quantum torpedoes had unraveled the molecular bonds holding the asteroid together, reducing millions of tons of matter to constituent particles that scattered in the solar wind. The observation deck remained frozen in shocked silence. "Minimum yield demonstration complete," Captain Chen announced. "I hope that gives you some sense of human defensive capabilities." Admiral Zexhai found his voice first. "Captain, what would constitute maximum yield for your weapons?" Chen considered the question with the same casual attention she might give to a request for the time. "Admiral, our maximum yield torpedoes are typically reserved for planetary defense scenarios. We don't carry them on diplomatic missions." "Planetary defense," Ambassador Krelthak repeated slowly. "Captain, are you saying that your species has weapons designed to destroy planets?" "Not destroy, Ambassador. Defend them. Though I suppose the distinction might seem academic to anyone on the receiving end." Dr. Yelandra's excitement had transformed into something approaching terror. Her crystalline structure flickered through colors that indicated deep distress. "Captain Chen, how long has your species possessed this level of technology?" "Our first quantum weapons were deployed about 60 years ago," Chen replied. "Though we've been refining the technology continuously since then. The Indomitable carries 4th-generation systems. Our newer ships have capabilities that are considerably more advanced." The implications of her words slowly sank in. Humanity had developed in 60 years what the Council considered theoretical physics, and they were calling it outdated technology. "Captain," Admiral Zexhai said carefully, "when you mentioned observing other civilizations during your journey here, were any of them hostile?" For the first time, Captain Chen's expression grew serious. "Admiral, humanity learned early in our history that the universe is not a safe place. We've encountered 17 different spacefaring species during our expansion into local space. 12 were peaceful and have become allies or trading partners. 3 were neutral and maintained minimal contact with us. 2 were actively hostile." "Were?" Ambassador Krelthak caught the past tense. "Were," Chen confirmed. "They're no longer a concern." The observation deck remained silent as the full meaning of the human demonstration became clear. This wasn't a primitive species seeking guidance from advanced neighbors. This was a military power that had been quietly studying galactic civilization, while concealing capabilities that exceeded anything the Council possessed. "Captain Chen," Ambassador Krelthak said slowly, "what exactly does humanity want from the Galactic Council?" Chen smiled, and this time her expression carried genuine warmth rather than diplomatic courtesy. "What we've always wanted, Ambassador. Peace, trade, cultural exchange, and cooperation between intelligent species. But we've learned that lasting peace requires the ability to defend it." Admiral Zexhai studied his sensor readings one more time, trying to process power outputs that exceeded his understanding of physics. "Captain, the Indomitable is classified as a diplomatic vessel. What would you call a military ship?" "Admiral, the Indomitable is a diplomatic vessel. But in human military doctrine, there's no meaningful distinction between diplomacy and the ability to enforce diplomatic agreements. We've found that negotiations tend to proceed more smoothly when all parties understand the consequences of breaking their word." Dr. Yelandra managed to find her voice. "Captain, you mentioned that this ship carries 4th-generation weapons and that your newer vessels are more advanced. How much more advanced?" Captain Chen looked out at the empty space where the asteroid had been, then back at the assembled Council representatives. "Doctor, the Indomitable was launched 12 years ago. In human military development, that makes her practically an antique. Our current generation ships carry weapon systems that make what you just observed look like a child's toy." Ambassador Krelthak felt the familiar patterns of his diplomatic career crumbling around him. "Captain, how many ships does humanity possess?" "I'm not authorized to discuss specific fleet strengths, Ambassador, but I can tell you that the Indomitable didn't travel to Council space alone. We never send our people into potentially hostile territory without adequate protection." The words struck the assembled observers like physical blows. Adequate protection. The most powerful military demonstration in recorded galactic history was considered adequate protection for a diplomatic mission. "Captain Chen," Admiral HFY said quietly, "I think it's time we had a more serious conversation about humanity's intentions in this region of space." Captain Chen nodded, her diplomatic mask finally falling away to reveal the calculating intelligence of someone who had been sent to evaluate potential allies or threats. "Admiral, I think that would be very wise." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the highest security chamber on Nexus Station. Representatives from every major species sat in stunned silence as Admiral HFY presented his analysis of the human weapons demonstration. The holographic display showed energy readings that exceeded their most optimistic theoretical models by orders of magnitude. Captain Chen sat at the center of the chamber, no longer playing the role of a primitive species seeking guidance. Her 5 companions had been revealed as military attachés, each representing different branches of human armed forces. Their casual confidence now seemed less like naive enthusiasm and more like the bearing of soldiers who had never encountered a problem they couldn't solve with superior firepower. "Captain Chen," Ambassador Krelthak began, his voice carefully controlled, "I think it's time for complete honesty between our peoples. What exactly is humanity's position in this region of space?" Chen leaned back in her chair, studying the assembled representatives with eyes that missed nothing. "Ambassador, humanity has been observing galactic civilization for approximately 40 years. Our deep space monitoring stations have been tracking your communications, studying your technology, and analyzing your political structures." The admission sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Dr. Yolandra's crystalline body flickered with patterns indicating extreme distress. "You've been spying on us?" "We've been learning about you," Chen corrected. "When a species discovers it's not alone in the universe, the responsible thing to do is understand what kind of neighbors you have. Some species are peaceful, others are not. We needed to know which category the Council represented." Admiral HFY leaned forward, his military mind focusing on tactical implications. "What did your analysis conclude, Captain?" "That the Galactic Council represents a remarkably stable and peaceful civilization," Chen replied. "Your species have managed to maintain order across thousands of worlds for millennia. That's genuinely impressive. It's also why we're here." Ambassador Krelthak felt a glimmer of hope. "So humanity does wish to join our community?" Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "Ambassador, humanity wishes to protect your community, but not necessarily join it in the way you're used to new species joining." The distinction was subtle but crucial, and several council members immediately grasped its implications. The Therulian representative spoke first. "Captain, are you saying humanity sees itself as our protector rather than our junior partner?" "I'm saying humanity has capabilities that could be useful in maintaining galactic peace, and we're willing to discuss how those capabilities might be employed for everyone's benefit." Admiral HFY studied his tactical displays, processing information that challenged everything he thought he knew about military power in the galaxy. "Captain, you mentioned that the Indomitable didn't travel alone. How many ships are we talking about?" Chen activated a small device, and the chamber's main display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red dots appeared throughout, the region each marking the position of a human vessel. The council representative stared in growing disbelief. There were dozens of contacts, scattered throughout supposedly empty space, all within striking distance of major council systems. "The human defense fleet maintains a standard escort formation for diplomatic missions," Chen explained. 47 vessels ranging from fast attack craft to heavy cruisers. The Indomitable is actually one of the smaller ships in the formation. Dr. Yolandra's voice was barely a whisper. "How long have they been there?" They've been moving into position. For the past 18 months, Chen replied. We wanted to ensure adequate security for this first contact before beginning negotiations. Ambassador Kreltak felt his understanding of the situation shifting fundamentally. Captain, what kind of negotiations are we talking about? Chen stood and walked to the display, gesturing to the red dots marking human ships. Ambassador, the Council has maintained peace in this region through diplomacy backed by superior force. That's worked well when dealing with primitive species who couldn't threaten your military superiority. But the galaxy is changing. She manipulated the display to show regions beyond Council space, areas marked with different symbols and colors. Our deep space surveys have detected at least 6 other major civilizations in nearby regions. 3 appear to be peaceful exploration-focused societies. 2 are expansionist empires that have been testing Council border defenses. 1 is actively hostile to all organic life. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as representatives processed this information. The Council had assumed they were the dominant civilization in their region of space, with only primitive species beyond their borders. Admiral Zexahai was the first to understand the full implications. Captain, are you saying that humanity wants to form a military alliance? I'm saying that humanity wants to ensure the continued existence of peaceful civilization in this region, Chen replied. The Council represents something valuable, a stable, cooperative society that's managed to avoid the wars that consume most galactic civilizations. But your military capabilities are designed to maintain internal order, not to face external threats of the magnitude that are approaching. She gestured again, and the display showed projected invasion routes from the hostile civilizations she'd mentioned. Our analysis suggests that within 50 years this region will face challenges that will test whether peaceful civilization can survive contact with species that don't share the Council's values. Ambassador Krelthak found his voice. What is humanity proposing? A partnership, Chen said simply. The Council continues to govern its member species and maintain internal peace. Humanity provides external defense against threats that exceed your current military capabilities. Dr. Yolandra managed to speak through her distress. And what would humanity gain from this arrangement? Chen smiled, and for the first time, it was completely genuine. Doctor, humanity gains something we've never had before, the chance to be part of a civilization that chooses cooperation over conquest. Our species developed in a hostile environment, surrounded by threats that required military solutions. We're very good at warfare, but we've never had the opportunity to be very good at peace. Admiral Zexhai studied the tactical implications of the human proposal. Captain, you're essentially offering to serve as our military force against external threats. We're offering to serve as one component of a larger defense strategy, Chen corrected. The Council has strengths that humanity lacks: diplomatic experience, cultural integration capabilities, peaceful resolution of complex disputes. We have strengths the Council lacks: the ability to project force across interstellar distances, and the experience to fight species that don't respond to diplomatic solutions. Ambassador Krelthak looked around the chamber at his fellow representatives. Shock was giving way to careful consideration as the implications of humanity's offer became clear. Captain, you mentioned that this is a diplomatic mission. What authority do you have to negotiate such arrangements? Chen's expression became formal. Ambassador, I have the authority to begin preliminary negotiations and to recommend courses of action to my government. But any formal alliance would require approval from both the human government and the full Galactic Council. And if the Council refuses your proposal? For the first time, Chen's expression showed something that might have been regret. Then humanity will withdraw from Council space and focus on preparing for the conflicts we see coming. We hope that won't be necessary, but we won't allow hostile forces to use Council territory as a staging area for attacks on our worlds. The threat was politely stated but absolutely clear. Humanity was offering partnership, but they were prepared to enforce their security requirements with or without Council cooperation. Admiral Zexhai broke the tense silence. Captain Chen, I think the Council needs time to discuss your proposal. This represents a fundamental change in how we understand galactic civilization. Chen nodded respectfully. Of course, Admiral. But I should mention that time may be a factor. Our long-range scouts have detected advanced reconnaissance probes from the hostile civilization I mentioned. We estimate approximately 5 years before they begin testing Council defenses. The session adjourned, representatives filed out in stunned silence. The galaxy they had known, peaceful, stable, and under their control, had revealed itself to be far more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. Captain Chen remained behind, studying the tactical displays with the calm attention of someone planning for war. The Council would make their decision, but humanity was prepared for any outcome. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted overnight, and nothing would ever be the same.